a lot of workplaces are trying to do the work of zooming out and applying a social justice framework to what they're doing. And yet, I rarely hear about urgency culture, a focus on productivity and efficiency and like that stuff. It is the opposite of dismantling power systems.
Yeah.
So what do you think of that?
I know. I was reading there was this resource that listed 10 characteristics of white supremacy culture. And when they got to urgency culture characteristic, it was saying this is an ironic characteristic because the urgency of capitalism is really it makes one lose sight of the urgency of like these justice problems.
Yes.
Right. That's
yes. And if you have to pick,
Mhm.
you pick non-oppressive power systems.
Right. Right. And what kind of blows my mind is that so how do you be urgent in the non-oppressive power system? Like,
Yeah.
and how do you urgently fight for, justice and in all the senses, because they're all connected, when working, 24 hours a day that's not the way you can't to do the work. You have to take the breaks and you have to go for the walk and look at a tree and enjoy the world around you, and then sit down and have a hard talk with your neighbor or read a book or whatever it is, or show up at there's so many ways to do to work for good. And so it's how to, and then this is the part that we talked about the other week and that you brought up, is like, how do you do that in a work setting where so like my company in solar, like we are making renewable energy projects, and that's so important for fighting climate change and bringing clean energy to communities. But then, and how to do that in a really holistic way. And we're trying, but it's still you still have to always be thinking about like the day to day, and I liked what you were saying about the people. You want to make sure your people are okay. This has been a lot, like I've gone down the rabbit hole. It's because it's so interesting. I just find myself sometimes feeling like, oh, I should be doing more. I should be doing more. But I've kind of checked off some, like, the things on my to-do list. So maybe it's time to go for a walk.
Because it's actually so that message of I should be doing more, that is you being controlled by an old narrative, a narrative that is bigger than you. It's these assumptions that many of us have grown up with about you should be doing the thing at all times, what you need to be productive, because your value comes from how productive you are. That's the message that so many of us grew up with.
Right. So many. And even when I've tried to really kind of I noticed bringing that lens of like being productive into the way I then try and rest. Or
I personally, if someone says something like, I'm concerned you're doing all the things, what are you doing for self-care? Like, I find the term self-care like so infuriating
Yeah.
because of because often what people mean by that is that that there is a right way to do self-care, and it's the things from the list of
Right.
whatever. And
Checking them
I
off.
don't know. I think part of my self-care is, I hate that word, but part of taking care of myself, is to have conversations about things that are meaningful and
Yeah.
authentic, and I don't know, maybe make some kind of impact to make the world a little better. Because I just it's interesting. So I have a 6-year-old, and we talk about power systems all the time. And even if we're watching a cartoon, I'll be like, power over. And so she has that framework about how power over is bad. And it's bad all the time.
Yeah.
And you certainly, power over, different from power of connection, power of influence, power of knowledge and expertise, just all the different powers. And power over is not healthy for
Right.
individuals or communities.
Right. Power over, right. And how much, right, thinking about it, I think about the individual, because I maybe the communities I'm in aren't, I think about this a lot as at an individual level, and how trying to have power over myself almost. And it's
Autonomy. Power over self is autonomy. And
autonomy.
you need autonomy. And there are so many people for whom autonomy is an access need. If you don't have autonomy, you're not regulated. You're then don't have full access to your brain, because it's not safe. And this is, different for different people with different brains, but I have the kind of brain that when I am recognizing power over, or an attempt at power over, I'm like, oh, unsafe bucket. I gotta leave this environment. And there's so many workplaces that people don't have autonomy.
Right. To say what they need and what they need,
And they don't know what they need.
They don't know what they need.
Because they've not been told they get to have needs.
They get to have needs.
Because you just got to do the thing, because that's what we do. That's what we do here.
Because I think that even in a culture, I do feel like my work culture is pretty good at the flexibility that you need to get your work done, but it's so hard on an individual level to really, and I think this might be because I'm new to the workforce, and and I think this is definitely linked to perfectionism, which is another characteristic.
It's part of the system.
All
right?
of it.
Yeah.
Right. So how to really kind of follow through with, and so not maybe this, I'm bringing personal things to it as well, but not feel bad about it.
Right,
How do you?
Yeah. So I know as a I honestly I've never actually used this term. I identify as a recovered perfectionist.
Okay.
Which is so, I don't think that's kind of a new thing that I think that I might claim that term, because I became a good enough, it's good enough person. When I became a parent, after it was life circumstances being no, you have a finite capacity. I never thought I thought I could just keep doing and just something had to give. And so anyway, and for me professionally, my progress notes, they're bare minimum to be, check the box. But they're good enough. And so it's really important for me as a parent that my child not struggle with perfectionism in the way that I have struggled with perfectionism most of my life. So like I am actively anti-perfectionism training. Just like I want from a social justice lens, like the way that we would be anti-racism and anti-ableism and anti-classism and anti-ageism and like all of it. I've started thinking about like anti-urgency culture, and anti-perfectionism and like all of it. And so I think this is just part of it. So you as a recovering, early in the process of recovering perfectionism, and I gotta hop to another meeting, but you come to this culture, you're new, and no one has explicitly named for you that this is a good enough culture, if in fact it is. So like, I find it, in a position of leadership, I find it really important that I name for my staff, this is a good enough place. This is a good enough culture. We are looking to be actively anti-perfectionism here. And it's my job to name that. Otherwise, people just do the thing and they assume that where it's been elsewhere is the same here, and it's not. I wonder how just like the theme of balancing between productivity, efficiency, and individualization, like how does that land on to your brain?
Yeah, I think it's such an important topic because business sort of setting is designed to meet deadlines and always be working, whether you're sitting at your desk or you're not. There's so much responsiveness expected, and the email notifications popping up, folks calling outside of your general work hours is huge. So I think one thing that I've gotten feedback on from a few employees is that when their managers encourage them to turn off those notifications, whether they're on PTO or if getting them in the evening makes you not be able to think about anything else, then that's a time when, if someone really needs to get you, they can find another way to do so. I know I'm someone that can't stop looking at my email notifications. So I think having that message explicitly communicated and saying that it's okay, like, yes, you're a crucial part of this team, and if something comes up and I need your expert opinion in a really timely manner, I'll probably reach out in a different avenue if that's okay. But I think setting those boundaries and having them be respected and ideally helped, if the company can help support them and establish them, those are huge parts of it. And I think just that open dialogue and creating a setting where it's not, someone's not scared to tell their manager, I don't think I can hit this deadline, and here's why, here's what I'm struggling with. And then working together to find alternative solutions, whether that deadline can be pushed, or if it is, something compliance related that really you have to hit that metric, how can you do so as a team? How can you work together? And just find other avenues to make it happen. But I think that culture of having that safe space to even just have that conversation can be really hard to come by sometimes, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So like some of the things that just came up for me as you were describing all of those nuggets of gold is around transparency of ground rules. Like one of the what we would put forth as a best practice of neuro-inclusive employment is explicit ground rules, because there are many brains that if you don't name the thing, it is not known. So even if you in your heart of hearts truly believe that anything goes in a meeting, that you can have your video on or off, if you don't name that, it doesn't count. Right. So I think that as one of the things applied to urgency culture here is that, from the top down, one practical thing to be done is to name the thing. We are not expecting you to be on all the time, because I think, especially because there's so much like emotional trauma from working in toxic work environments, that I think there's almost the assumption that it's that way everywhere. And so if you want to intentionally have it be different at your place of employment, you name that.
Yeah, totally. And I think too, the power dynamic can come into play as well. If you're getting a directive from someone who's either your supervisor or maybe 2 levels up, those are really hard situations to be put in and feel comfortable standing your ground or honoring your boundaries and expectations. So I think anytime that that could be set from above and modeled, even more importantly,
Yes.
is really the ideal scenario, because it's tough. It's really tough.
It is. And if you think about, like urgency culture many might say is rooted in capitalism, is rooted in like oppressive power structures. And part of the demand of being, of being on all the time is a power over dynamic. And so
Yeah.
if there is an imbalance in power dynamic, I think the responsibility falls to the person who has more social capital, is in a place of supervisors, but it's your responsibility to name, sure, of like, I am not expecting this of you. It is normal to, in fact, leave work, whether it, even leave work, even if you are working remotely, leave work and be done. And I'm not going to intrude upon this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think having structures built in, so there are ways to safely call out those sort of incongruous moments would be essential. One practice we found really effective here is just, I conduct stay interviews. So you may have heard of exit interviews when you're chatting with an employee and they're on their way out. And there's pros, right? They're usually more candid when they're on their way out. They don't have anything to lose, and it can be really valuable feedback. But the stay interview, the goal is like, okay, how can we actually get candid feedback, create a safe enough environment that people feel like their job won't be at risk in any way if they're sharing what they really feel, and that gives you a chance as an employer to proactively increase job satisfaction and do something for retention prior to getting a 2 weeks notice. And maybe you try and keep them, but if you can do it before it gets to that point, it's so much better for everybody.
Absolutely. When you think about, I mean, if we are going to use the, unhealthy yet ever present, productivity, efficiency based mindset, it is a loss of productivity to keep having people quit their jobs and having to hire and onboard new people. Like it's win-win for people to be self-actualized in their jobs. When you zoom out and you think about all the systems of oppression, and that like the idea that the pressure to do the thing all the time is because like people get the message that value comes from what you do and what you produce. And I think that's gross. What do you think?
It is. It's, it's about, like you said it right. You hit the nail on the head. It's about, who can afford it and who does not, who cannot afford it. And, with, racial and discrimination that's, that we see across Vermont and in our schools and just our walk of life, in Vermont, it's just like, it seems to be like, we're being divided against people of color, non-people of color, of how to, interact with each other. But the way I look at it is, if I can be more over empowerment over the other individual, then that makes me feel good. But in reality, all you're doing is hurting communities. And yes, it is very, very gross because it's, it was founded on before, how Christopher Columbus, it was all founded on how it got started in the United States of America.
Violence, power over oppression. And that's the narrative that has persisted.
It has. It persisted so long, but people are, like you said, they're somewhat oblivious to that, or try not to understand as much, or they want to try not to understand it, or they try to ignore that, side of culture. They try to sit there and dismiss it because it's just how our culture, is.
Yeah.
I can't tell, there's nothing we can do. The way I look at it is there's nothing we can do, like flick a switch, and is set and done. It takes progress, it takes time. But ignoring it is just making it worse. Ignoring about it and just being oblivious about it just makes it worse because that's wrong. And you're trying your best to stay out of it, but you can't stay out of it because it also brings in white culture too as well. How does that become intermixed too as well? how does that intertwine with what we see too as well?
Right, right. And I think that, you've hit the nail on the head that power over hurts everyone. It hurts individuals at the margins, and it hurts whole societies. Part of being oblivious, is privilege. And part of it is like, but really, if you zoom out, you say there's nothing controversial here. This is wrong. This is wrong. And we have to have these conversations.
Having these discussion and conversation, it's the only way we're going to help ourselves, but also help the society that we have to make meaningful change in.
Yeah.
Basically, the only way change is going to happen if we discuss about and have that conversation and sit down and have those we can't ignore it. We can't sit there and try to evade those conversations, because yes, it's in our culture. And with me, it's just, may I be that voice? Do I want to be that voice? Do I think I have the courage to be that voice for others to say, this is wrong, we need to move past this? Keep our culture intact, but need to move past the rhetoric, the ableism, the discrimination, the racism of we're living in the past, literally. We're living in 1900. And we should move past that.
Yeah.
There's no long racism and hate has no place here. Literally, not in society, and definitely not in Vermont.
Amen. I when I do my editing, I'm going to really make sure that, and we've been, the last couple weeks at Brain Club, we've been talking about oppression, and so the setting's been really set to get people thinking about the aspects of day-to-day culture that are actually rooted in racism and capitalism and ableism and classism and all of the isms. And there's no place for that here. And so we got to be talking about this. So I think that, we're trying to get people to zoom out and say, what am I doing that is actually perpetuating power over, even if it's not, they wouldn't identify it as racism, but it is, because power over is it's all the same.
If it's that's correct. If it's going against you, it's already discrimination.
One of the things that I'm hoping that people take away from this conversation is that I think to connect urgency culture in the day-to-day with a social justice framework, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it.
Mhm.